Hello again. This is Dr. Brad Holt with the 6th segment of our series about Christian spirituality. It is based on my book, Thirsty for God. So to begin today, I would like to mention specifically 3 persons whom I discuss in the book under the heading Asceticism. Asceticism means the ability to say no. Asceticism means Christianity as a spiritual discipline. Not to say no just for any purpose, but to say no to a good in order to adopt a greater good. If one is disciplined as an athlete, one can run faster or swim faster, and this is the idea behind Christian disciplines as well. I'm going to introduce you to 3 ancient writers. The first one is named Origen. He lived right around the year 200, and he was one of the greatest intellectuals of early Christianity. He came to faith through another great teacher named Clement of Alexandria. And Origen inherited the school founded by Clement, and there taught Christianity as the best philosophy. Not philosophy in the abstract sense, but in the sense of a philosophy of life. Now, Origen was an extremely dedicated Christian. His father had been a martyr to the faith, and at age 16 he also wanted to be a martyr. But his mother outwitted him. She didn't want to see him go to his death, so she, using her intelligence, simply hid his trousers. And the young man dared not to go out of the house to offer himself to death. Origen is important to us as an example of someone who buys into the culture in which they grew up. The culture of Egypt in his time was what we call Hellenistic, or Greek. The Greek philosophers had developed high systems of thought, and Plato particularly was one who was popular at this time. There were newer developments, and it was therefore called Neoplatonism. Now, Origen was a person of deep prayer and of deep learning, as I said. And he so much adopted the Hellenistic views of the world that later on people rejected his views and called him a heretic. He's an example for us of someone who enters into the concepts of a culture in order to express Christian spirituality. Now, if we go further west, we find Tertullian, about the same period of time. He is in some senses just the opposite of Origen. He was a lawyer and a rigorist. He did not want Christianity to get mixed up with any local culture. One of his famous sayings is, "What does Athens have to do with Jerusalem?" By which he meant all that philosophy which Origen loved so much should be set aside for the simple truths of the Christian gospel coming from a Semitic background. Now, Tertullian is the father of all those Christians today who regard engaging in pleasures as somehow illicit. For Tertullian, going to the Roman amphitheaters to see people torn by animals was a repugnant thought, and he taught that Christians should be very severe in their asceticism. My third example of asceticism is Ephrem. Perhaps you haven't heard of him. He wrote not in Greek as Origen did, nor in Latin as Tertullian did, but in Syriac. Now, Syriac is very close to the language we think that Jesus himself spoke, commonly called Aramaic. And Ephrem was able to take this Semitic language and express the thoughts of Christian spirituality without translating them into one of the Western languages, Greek or Latin. Ephrem is known as a poet. He wrote many hymns praising God. And he's also known as a person who cared for other people. There was a great famine, and Ephrem was extremely helpful in seeing that people got what they needed. And so we find 3 early Christian writers, all of them proposing Christian discipline, that is, something that may not come easily, something that requires saying no to something. But each in their different cultural backgrounds, and therefore expressing their asceticism in different ways. Next time, we'll hear some more about ancient Christians, and I'll see you then. For a spiritual exercise related to this talk, I suggest that you practice saying no. Perhaps it's to something in your culture. If you're following your culture and you find that the culture does not fit with the teachings of Christian spirituality, then say no. For example, if you're in the United States, our culture is so devoted to wealth and success and celebrity. It's so devoted to eating more than we need. Consider saying no to some day when you find yourself conscious of doing something simply for the sake of fitting into the culture that may not be healthy for you. Just say no.